The Toyota 4Runner. There are a few nameplates that are as iconic when it comes to overlanding and off-roading. But as legendary as the 4Runner's name is, it's never really been able to keep up with either of these two when it comes to a rocky trail. The Jeep Wrangler and the Ford Bronco. However, the 6th generation 4Runner finally has a trim that's going to try, the aptly named Trailhunter. Here at Edmunds, we test everything. So to find out if the new Toyota can keep up with these all-American beasts, we've got a 4-pack of tests today for your enjoyment. A hill climb, the Ziggurat, a rock crawl, and a trip down a trail. That's enough stalling, let's get started. To kick things off, we've got a hill climb, and it's a pretty tough one. It's a very loose surface with lots of rocks and some parts that they're gonna have to climb over bigger rocks as well. It should provide a pretty stern test to these vehicles' powertrain and traction control systems. And all of them we're gonna start in just 4 high in off-road mode, and then we're gonna layer in other things if they do get stuck. And we're gonna do that pretty quickly because we don't wanna tear up this trail. So we're gonna start here in the Toyota and see how things go. So the 4Runner Trailhunter, very closely related to the Tacoma Trailhunter, and this trim only available with that hybrid powertrain, turbocharged 2.4 liter 4-cylinder and electric motors. This first part of the hill is fairly easy, but this next part gets very challenging very quickly. So got my camera on because I don't have a spotter up here. Now we're in 4 high, multi-terrain select is set to automatic, and we'll layer in things if we do get a little bit stuck here. Just trying to go kind of slow, as Emmy always says, as slow as possible, as fast as necessary. I do have a lockable rear axle, and I can disconnect the front stabilizer bar if I need to. And it seems like I need to. So we're gonna back down a little bit here. Rear is locked, still in 4 high. Now, multi-terrain select does give you some other options for like dirt, mud, sand, things like that. None of those really seem to apply here, so we're gonna try to keep it in auto for now and see how things go. So back up to the spot right here where we got stuck last time. Rear locked, and yeah, it just kind of crawls its way up now. There are definitely things we're gonna do later where we're gonna get to test that low range out, but for now, 4 high seems to suffice. Yep, there's a little more gas there. Got the pitch and roll meter here in the instrument cluster, and it looks like we're pitched up close to 30 degrees, so pretty steep on this hill. And yeah, pretty light work there for the Toyota. Toyota's traction control systems have been really good for a while off-road now, and this 4Runner is no exception. I also appreciated that I was able to get really even output out of this powertrain. Even in 4 high, so we weren't even in the low range. It was very easy to just kind of stay on the throttle and then add a little power as I needed to get over that one section of rocks right there. But yeah, on the hill climb, the 4Runner proved to be pretty proficient. Let's see how the Wrangler and Bronco do, and see if we even need to turn anything on at all with those two vehicles. All right, we've moved on to the Wrangler, and the Wrangler also comes with a hybrid powertrain, but this time it's a plug-in hybrid. And between its 2 electric motors and its turbocharged 2 liter 4-cylinder engine, this vehicle actually makes both the most horsepower and torque of any of the 3 that we have out here today. Now, to give this thing a bit of a challenge, I do want to see if we can take this hill just on battery power alone. So I've got it in the electric drive mode, so it's going to try to use the electric motors as much as possible. Edging up the hill here, no real problem so far. We are in 4 high. You actually can't activate the off-road drive mode while you're in electric mode, but we're just going to see kind of how far it goes. Up to this first part of the rock. And yeah, the electric motors don't want to push it any further. I'm going to give it a little more throttle, see what happens. There comes the gas engine. Oh, oh, that gas engine kicks on pretty abruptly in this mode, so I don't really like how that feels. We're going to put it back into hybrid, see how we do. And we are starting to dig, so now we're going to add on stuff here. Off-road mode. The Wrangler has a lot more hardware than the 4Runner that we can kind of add on as we need to here. All right, off-road mode active. We're still stuck. I'm going to back it up a little bit. I think if I give it a little bit of a run in 4 high with the off-road on, it should climb up a little bit better. So here we go. One more time. to the tough part of the hill here. And there we go. Much better, huh? Yep. And just like in the 4Runner, power output in hybrid mode, really smooth. 4 high and a little bit of off-road magic sprinkled in with the traction control. And we're doing pretty well. In addition to 4 high, the Wrangler also offers a 4 high part-time mode, and this is meant for situations like this when you're in a low traction situation. You really don't want to use this mode on pavement, but we're not on pavement, so we're going to try it with this one now. To lock the rear in this vehicle, we actually have to go all the way down to 4 low, but I'd like to try to avoid that if I can. So on the Wrangler, we didn't end up needing to lock any of the axles, just off-road mode and the part-time 4-wheel drive, and it made it up. Now it's the Ford's turn, the only one here without an electrified powertrain. It's got a 2.7 liter turbocharged V6, and it makes the least power of all the vehicles here, but it still makes over 300 horsepower and over 400 pounds-feet of torque. All these vehicles, they just make so much power. So like the other ones, we're just in 4 high right now, and there isn't really an off-road drive mode I could choose, so I put it in slippery. The other drive modes will kind of force you into like 4 low or turn other things off and on, but I got the traction control on and everything here, and we're already stuck. Back up just a touch. This Bronco does have also a lot of equipment that I can turn to if I need it. Locking front and rear axles, front stabilizer bar, disconnect as well. Oh, got a little sideways, but we're going up here. Yeah. Gotta keep it pointed here. A little more gas, see what we can do. Yep, there she goes. Wow. Even easier than both of the other ones. Wow. And we've made it up to the top. This thing just kind of Billy goated its way right up the hill with, I would say, the least stuff on. So if I had to rank them after the hill climb, I would say the Bronco comes out on top with the Wrangler behind it, and the 4Runner in third because it did have to lock its rear axle to make it up. However, all 3 of them, I would say, made it up the hill with relative ease because none of them even had to dip into the low range, and that's a pretty good showing for each of these vehicles so far.
You guys know the drill, but at least this time we shot some cool slow motion dirt action to show you in the background. If you've been enjoying our videos, please like and subscribe so we can keep making more of them. And if you're looking for information on the 4Runner or any other new or used vehicle, head over to Edmunds.com, and while you're there, you can even get an instant trade-in offer for your current set of wheels. Back to the action. Up next, we have the Ziggurat of Integrity, but we couldn't find a Ziggurat out here, so instead we have this rock. And this should do just about the same thing, which is to provide a stern test of each vehicle's flexibility and articulation. We'll drive them up here as far as they can go or until that rear wheel comes off the ground. And once they're up here, we'll also let you see what they've got going on underneath, because underbody protection when you're off-roading is essential. So the Toyota made it pretty far up this rock. Based on other vehicles that we've had out here, I'm actually quite impressed at how far the 4Runner managed to make it up before that rear tire came off the ground. It's showing a lot of suspension flexibility here. And while it's up here, we also got a very good look at one of the key differences between the Trailhunter and the TRD Pro, and that would be its old man EMU shocks. Now the TRD Pro is more of the desert runner of the two with its Fox shocks. These are basically designed to help it handle heavier loads. So if you're gonna overland this thing and you want to add things like a rooftop tent or other heavy stuff, maybe build out the back, this is just going to handle that type of thing much better than the TRD Pro would. When it comes to underbody protection, Toyota has wrapped sort of steel around all the things that you would want protected. So there's not what I would call a skid plate, it's just kind of like a wrapped steel protection around the transfer case, the differential. It's got a composite shield under the fuel tank, and this being a hybrid, the battery's placement is really important because you want that to be protected, and to do that they basically tucked it way up. Now that does impact cargo room. The cargo load-in height for this vehicle is really high, even compared to the other SUVs you have. If you go for the gas version of the 4Runner, that's actually much better. Up front, you also also have a steel skid plate, which matches what you're gonna find under the Jeep and the Ford. And speaking of the Jeep, let's put it up here and see how she does. This is no slight to the 4Runner because it put up a pretty impressive result on our stand-in Ziggurat, but look at the Wrangler, look at how far it went, and it absolutely blows the Toyota away. This just really demonstrates what the Wrangler is all about. It has unmatched flexibility and articulation from anything coming off of a showroom floor, thanks to those live front and rear axles. And while those do make it worse to drive on the road than the other two vehicles we have here, if you're gonna do stuff like this regularly, that's a trade-off that you would gladly make. Underbody protection on the Wrangler, fantastic. Steel skid plates everywhere, big one up front too. Nothing to complain about, everything protected. Its battery is also tucked up right under its rear seat where it's nice and safe. And as you can tell from the tire nearly touching the front fender, this is basically a flawless performance from the Wrangler on this test. So the Bronco beats out the Toyota, but just like the 4Runner, neither of these vehicles come even close to where that Wrangler ended up. Both the Toyota and the Ford have independent front suspensions, which again, makes them much better to drive on the street, but out here, they come up well short. Now for the Bronco, this is an impressive result because seeing something this big and physically imposing flex like this will always be a sight to behold. And I would say that it was even a touch easier to load in than the Toyota. You just had fewer things to worry about with a little bit more clearance all around. Underneath the Ford, protection everywhere that you would want it except in one area, and that is the rear diff, which does hang down quite low. And as we've seen in our Bronco that we've owned for a few years, that has a tendency to drag on the ground or on rocks when you're off-road, so just be careful of that. But otherwise, I think the results of this test are pretty clear. A big win for the Jeep, the Ford in second, and the Toyota bringing up the rear with an impressive result of its own. Now we come to the part of the video where the 4Runner needs to put up or shut up the rock crawl. Now, as you can tell out the window behind me, there are no shortage of rocks to choose from out here in Johnson Valley. So we found what we think is a pretty challenging setup that's going to stretch this rig to its limits, and we're gonna see if the 4Runner can make it through. Okay, so as we get onto the rocks, there are a few things that we are worried about here with the 4Runner. So it does have significantly better ground clearance than the Land Cruiser, thanks in part to these 33-inch Toyo tires, which come standard on the Trailhunter. Just over 10 inches of ground clearance here. The Land Cruiser has just under 9, so this is much better on that regard, and it has better approach, breakover, and departure angles as well. Now, compared to the Bronco and the Wrangler, those angles are not good at all. Both of those vehicles have well over 40 degrees of approach angle and well over 30 degrees of departure angle. So the geometry of the 4Runner is just gonna make it more difficult in this vehicle. So we've got Scott out there spotting for me. I can see his hands just there above the hood. And we're gonna go nice and slow. We've got everything turned on, of course. We're in 4 low, rock crawl in the terrain setting, rear locker, front stabilizer bar disconnected. In instances like this, rock crawling really is a team sport because I could not do this without my spotter. Little scrape there, but you're saying we can keep going. While we're waiting for Scott to reposition, the throttle dexterity is pretty good. We're in 4 low, and this doesn't have the same kind of crawl ratio that you're gonna get out of the Wrangler or the Bronco, but I still feel like I have pretty good throttle dexterity. I'm able to kind of climb up on a rock when I need to. The hybrid powertrain, you don't find yourself touching the gas that much in this situation, honestly, because it's got the torque from the electric motor just kind of pulls you forward a bit. It's probably a little bit stronger than I would like, actually. I would just like a little bit more, I guess, the ability to kind of modulate that myself. So I'm actually 2-footing right now. I got left foot braking, right foot throttle, but we're just gonna make it right through. Back end is gonna come off the last section here, and pretty good. Not bad 4Runner. For a vehicle not known for rock crawling, I would say that it did pretty well there. Now, of course, we're going to put the Wrangler and the Bronco through the same thing, and it's likely that they'll be able to do it much easier. But the fact that the 4Runner can now sort of at least keep up with those guys, it's a pretty good showing for the Toyota. Okay, now it's time to take this on in the Wrangler. In the 4Runner, we had to take this on a different angle because of its clearances or lack thereof, but here in the Wrangler, we can just kind of take this straight on. Much better approach and departure angles, though weirdly,
The breakover angle is a bit worse, but the shielding on this thing is so good underneath it that a lot less worry. But what we're watching out for right here is throttle dexterity, because when it's in electric mode like this, so I'm in the hybrid drive mode, but just the electric motor is driving the vehicle right now, it really pulls the vehicle forward hard. So like right now, even as I'm coming up this rock right here, I haven't actually touched the throttle yet. It just kind of rolls. It's just braking basically. It's almost like one pedal driving, except that one pedal is the brake. And there we go. I just had to touch the throttle for the first time. And I will say, adding in just a little bit of power was easy, but one thing to watch out for is, yeah, it's gonna yank you forward a little bit harder than you would expect. But yeah, as you can see, we're up here, and there's a lot less stress. Got a good view of Scott. I actually think the front visibility out of the Wrangler is better than the 4Runner. Its hood kind of tapers down nicely, so you're able to see a little bit more. But this has definitely the worst camera setup of the three. Both the 4Runner and the Bronco have pretty robust surround view camera systems. Here in the Wrangler, you do get a front view camera, but it doesn't even take up the full screen. It only takes up about half of it. And it's a bit kind of like low resolution, and the other two much better. The Toyota has that cool transparent hood thing. Nothing like that here in the Wrangler, but you do get better just actual visibility out the front windshield. But other than that, really drama free here in the Wrangler. Okay, now we're in the Bronco, and just like in the Wrangler, this should be pretty drama-free. The Bronco has the biggest tires of any of the vehicles that we have here, 35-inch Goodyear Territory MTs, and that's part of the reason that it also has the most ground clearance, over 11 inches of this stuff. And right now, we're just kind of cruising along here. This is the only one here without an electrified powertrain, so at idle, it definitely doesn't push as hard as the other two. I do feel I have quite good dexterity. I'm able to dose out the power really well. It's got a big hood. Visibility out the front is a bit worse. On the edges of the hood, there's these little like hook thingies, and they make it a bit harder to feel where the corners of the vehicle are. But it makes up for it by having my favorite forward camera view of the three. Unlike the Jeep, it actually takes up the whole screen, and it's super high resolution, really bright, really easy to see. And it's also got a few different modes that are really helpful. So if I want to see down the sides of where the front tires are, it does that too. Now the Toyota does, but I think everything just looks a little bit sharper here in the Ford, so it is the one that I prefer. You can definitely feel that out here, the Wrangler has a bit more suspension flexibility to it than the Ford does. But that being said, this thing is still awfully impressive when it's going slow over rocks like this. The throttle mapping is just so good. Ease off the rock here. And I can tell because this camera's fantastic. We were worried a little bit about the rear diff on the Ford. It does hang down pretty low, but it never touched rock at all. And its better breakover angle meant that we were actually on the skid plates on those rocks a little bit less than we were in the Wrangler. So clearly in third place we had the 4Runner, just because we had to be a lot choosier with the route. It doesn't have the clearance of these other two vehicles, so we just had to be a lot more careful as we were going through. But that being said, I did like the throttle response, and I did think that its camera views were pretty helpful. And now things get a bit more complicated, because when you think rock crawling, you automatically think Wrangler. However, I'm actually going to put it in second place here, and that's for two key reasons. One, its undersides seem to scrape a lot more on the rocks, so the skid plates were really put to good use. And two, I don't think I like how the 4xE's powertrain just kind of pulls you through things. You're getting constant torque out of that electric motor, but it's so much that it's a bit lurchy going forward. Now it is nice that when you need to add a bit of power, the gas engine does kick in pretty gently, and I definitely found that in the Ford, which is our winner. There's no substitute for ground clearance. It made it over without scraping as much, and I like the throttle responsiveness of the Bronco much better. So in a bit of an upset, it's Ford over Jeep in a rock crawling exercise. Who would have thought? Now we're going to take each of these vehicles on a bit of a trail drive, but we're not going to declare a winner here because, let's be honest, they're all a bit overqualified for this sort of thing. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I really kind of like and don't like about each of these rigs, starting here in the Toyota. Now, the Trailhunter It's a cool new trim, and it comes with a cool new interior color scheme to match. I do like this subtle green color that's given to a lot of the upholstery. I even like the contrast stitching here. It just makes this 4Runner interior feel a bit more stylish and spruced up. And there are other ways that Toyota makes the Trailhunter feel special as well. It's got some very cool gizmos and gadgets that the other vehicles don't offer. For example, there's a JBL speaker up there that I can pull out, pair my phone to, and take with me to a campsite. And there's even a little light that I can take out right here in case I need a light in an emergency. Now, this is a pre-production vehicle, so there are a few features that are supposed to be on here that are missing. There should be a front skid plate under here that says Trailhunter on it in nice big letters. And the one that is missing that I really wanted to show you was an onboard air compressor. So if you need to air down and air back up, you can do so without having to bring extra tools along. A very cool feature. Toyota has definitely designed this vehicle to make overlanding easier. A lot of stuff that you might want to add on, like including those rigid fog lights in the light bar up front, it's already done for you. Now, you do pay a lot for this. This is a nearly $70,000 4Runner after all, but it is pretty cool, I have to say. The other thing that you'll immediately notice driving the 4Runner are the noises coming off of that snorkel just on the other side of the passenger A-pillar. It kind of sounds like a blow-off valve gone wrong. Now, this engine doesn't really sound very good to begin with, and with the snorkel making these terrible noises all the time, whether you accelerate at low speeds or on the highway, the soundtrack for the 4Runner just really leaves a lot to be desired. Now, my colleague Nick recently did a video comparing this vehicle to its relatives, the Tacoma and the Land Cruiser, and this is what he had to say about the braking in particular.
There's a lot of brake dive. Ugh.
So it's true, you definitely get a bit more nosedive here than the Land Cruiser, but that's for a good reason. One is that's kind of a byproduct of the added clearance, which I have appreciated out here today so far. And the other thing is that, yeah, these old man EMU shocks, they are designed to handle heavier loads, and that's just sort of a consequence of that. But I would say that if you're off-roading or doing anything out here, I actually like this suspension setup a lot more than what you're getting in the Cruiser. If I had to complain about how the 4Runner drives, it's that when you're doing a bit higher speed stuff, this powertrain, it does take a little bit to get going. It's almost like there's a bit of turbo lag to it. So if you're trying to do big drifts or donuts or anything like that, it was just a lot easier to do those in the Jeep and the Ford, and I prefer those two powertrains to this one. Here in the Jeep, there were no real surprises. Driving a Wrangler off-road is always going to be one of the absolute best things you can do from behind the wheel. But this was my first chance to get some extended time in the dirt with the 4xe powertrain, and as much as I didn't love it for the slow speed stuff, for high speed stuff, I actually find this powertrain to be pretty great. Its electric motors are a lot more powerful than the ones you're going to get in the Toyota, and it's just got tons and tons of instant torque. So you can be rolling along at like 3 miles an hour and then just give it a lot of throttle, and all of a sudden, there goes the tail, and you're shooting forward real fast. Jeep is starting to show its age a little bit, and it is probably the worst of these three to drive on the road, but it's not designed to drive on a road. It's designed to be driven out here, and out here, it's still fantastic. And finally, we come to the Bronco. The Bronco is sort of a happy medium between the other two vehicles here. If you want tip of the spear off-road capability, you're still going to go with the Wrangler because it'll just be able to reach places that neither of the other two can because of its suspension and how it's laid out. But the Bronco offers fewer compromises on the road while offering greater off-road capability than the Toyota. And I also really enjoy this V6 powertrain. Yes, electricity can be fun, but sometimes there's just no substitute for cylinders. Broncos are still way too noisy on the highway, but other than that, kind of love this thing. So, to the question of can the 4Runner keep up with these other vehicles, the answer to that is yes, for the most part. I think that if you still want to get a vehicle with maximum off-road capability, you are still much better off going with a Wrangler or a Bronco. But the 4Runner, it can do about 90% of what the other vehicles can, and there are plenty of things to really like about the Toyota. If you love the old 4Runner, you're gonna love this new 4Runner even more. It's basically smoothed all of the rough edges off of the 4Runner. So for example, you don't have to deal with a 5-speed automatic transmission anymore, but it's also kept a lot of the things that people loved about the 4Runner, like that rear glass that slides down, one of the only vehicles that can do that.
And now to answer the question of which of these three I would rather take home. There's plenty to like about the Toyota, but the noises coming off of that snorkel would really start to annoy me. And it's also very, very expensive for a 4Runner, as it sits nearly $70,000 with destination charges. And this Wrangler 4xe, it costs even more. It's almost 80 grand. And it's still not great to drive on the road. And that just leaves the Ford.
The Bronco costs just slightly more than the 4Runner, but I think that it looks the best by far, loved its clearances off-road, and it had my favorite powertrain of the bunch. Sometimes there is no substitute for having a couple more cylinders.
So if I'm driving home in one, I'm taking the Ford, and even if I can't hear myself think on the highway, I won't care because I will know how cool I look behind the wheel of it. Thanks for watching.